Hey folks, in today's video we're going to cover the replies that Johan gave to Tinto Talks 5 about estates for EU5. Quite a lot of replies by him. I think there were 4 pages of replies, which is pretty insane, but I've picked out like the most interesting ones, the ones that I think call out changes from EU4 or in general might just be interesting for us to talk about. And we're just going to get straight into it, to be honest. So the first one here is funny, because I was talking about this at the end of the last video about EU5. I was kind of wondering from some of the phrasing he'd used whether you could control the sea in certain tiles, and that is what somebody else thought as well. So Cody Wolf here asked, will naval passages such as the Bosphorus, the Dardanelles, the Danish belts, etc. be controllable? If Denmark controls the Danish belts, at least later in the game, it will give some incentive for countries like Germany to build up their fleets and actually, fight their way through those blockades in a way. Furthermore, is it even possible for a country to be severed from such things? Using the 1337 start date, they believe Genoa controls part of the Black Sea coast. If the Byzantines or Ottomans want to seize that territory, they could simply close off the entrance into the sea and take it without the ability for the Genoese navy to intervene. And Johan's reply was, there are mechanics for those passages that will be revealed later. So as I thought in that video, I think we are going to get some version of zone of control by fleets in certain areas. Now, I'm not sure how it's going to work because in certain areas you could just choke things so easily. Like if you're playing as Portugal or Castile, you could easily block the Straits of Gibraltar like so easily. So I'm not sure 100% how this is going to work. Maybe it'll be like some kind of modifier if you control it. As I thought in that video, if there's trade routes through there especially, I wonder if you get like a cut of the trade or something like that. But anyway, as Johan says, we will find out in the near future. And the next one, Hoy3 asks, can estates force through law changes and reforms if they are dissatisfied enough and powerful enough, even if you don't call a parliament? And his reply was, there are ways for that. I imagine he means more like rebellions, civil wars or something like that, potentially. Or potentially some other mechanic he's hinting at that we're not aware of or that hasn't been in previous games. And then next, Old Sealand asks, what happens if one of the estates gets above 100% power? And you can't, basically is the answer. You can't, as power percentage is a normalized distribution, so you can't go over a 100. You can never be like fully in control of everything. You always are a percentage of that 100%. Durfruit then asked, loved the map. I enjoyed the map as well. A lot of you did as well in the comments in the last video and on the community post that I did. And their question was basically all around achievements. They want it to be tied to Iron Man. They don't want it to work like CK3 now and Victoria 3, where basically you have free reign to get the achievements. I like the fact that you can use different mods like the community flavor pack and things like that and still earn achievements. And then Johan's reply was, if it was up to him, he would always require Iron Man. So he says you should always need Iron Man to get achievements. I kind of agree with this. I think you should be able to use mods, but I think you should have to use Iron Man to get achievements. So you can't just save scum to get achievements. Although at the end of the day, I'm one of these people that think like, it doesn't really matter, does it? Like if I get achievements, great. Do I worry about other people getting achievements? Not at all. Not in the slightest. I couldn't care if you mod and get 100% achievements because it doesn't affect me in the slightest. So I think it would be good if it works this way, but I don't really care either. And then Beagle Torin asked, can we expect estate privileges to be revoked at an instant click if the requirements are fulfilled? Or will it be a process such as passing a law in Victoria 3 and they'd be happier if it worked like Vicky 3? And Johan's reply was, technically it is a click to remove it. The consequences may not be something you are willing to live with though. So it is going to work on a click and you just revoke it. But he is saying the effects from those choices are going to last quite a while. So it's not going to be an instant click and then it's kind of like over and done with. You are going to be living with the consequences for quite a while. So kind of, I guess, the flip of how it works in Victoria 3, where it takes you quite a while to pass the law. It kind of passes it immediately, but then you see the consequences for a while. Again, I don't really mind which way this works. I'm fine with it working this way, to be honest. And obviously, these are all subject to change. This could change before launch. All the answers here are just how it works at the moment and really give us an insight into what Johan thinks about these systems. So it does kind of give us an idea of where other systems might go as well. And then And 7 Ru. Yeah, I know what it's supposed to say. Will a ruler's skill still factor into things? And yes, they will. And they're going to talk about this later. So I imagine we are going to keep the kind of like stat stick rulers that we have now in EU4. I wouldn't be surprised if it's mixed up a little bit, so it's not just totally randomized or something like that, where, if you roll the dice and you get like 111s, and then you're lucky enough to get like, 666 is the best one. I can't remember off the top of my head. And you're just having a great time. I'm sure it's going to be a little bit improved on, but it does look like we are keeping those ruler sticks of some kind in EU5. Old Sealand then asked, if one of the estates is disloyal and rebel, will they be represented by rebels like in the EU4? And if so, will they become their own separate nation when they enforce their demands, like with the Cossacks estate, or how will that aspect work? It is rather different, Johan says. It's closer to the civil war mechanics in Imperator Rome, so the things he's brought from Imperator, the things he learned, I think, from the bad launch of Imperator as well, and the relaunch of it. It looks like we are going to get some of those mechanics potentially into EU5. And I think a lot of the mechanics in Imperator Rome were great, especially later on in 2.0 and things like that. I think a lot of the mechanics outside of trade were pretty much like spot on for Imperator Rome. So to bring over some of those mechanics, I'm pretty happy with that. Obviously, we'll see what it's like in the launch of EU5. Kingsley Dale asked, they noticed that food production was mentioned. When will we hear about that? And we're going to hear about it sometime after the summer. I would imagine maybe after the game has been officially announced. I think we're still going to get these like, not vague overviews, but these really like far out rough overviews of systems like we have with the States. I don't think they're going to get into the fine details of like food production until we get the build up to launch dev diaries. Because we've got like a year of those probably. So there's no point kind of like wasting them now where they're still going to talk a little bit vague about the game. I think they'll do the announcement and then we'll get these really important ones like how food production works. That is going to be a super interesting one as we have populations, people going off to war, etc. How is that going to affect things across your nation? I couldn't decide, then asked levies. That means standing armies aren't in the game until mid to late game? Is that correct? And the answer was yes. ... So yeah, we are going to see the switch from levies to standing armies, which was in one of the previous Tinto talks. Was it the last one? It might be the one before. Do you know what? They all blur into one for me, but that has already been hinted at. So good to see that pretty much confirmed. Although what ... means, who can tell? And then I'm not even going to try pronounce this guy's name, but anyway, their question was, so estate power correlates to the respective population, but what about serfs and slaves? Like if my nobles own a lot of serfs and slaves, shouldn't that empower the noble estate relative to the other estates? And the answer is no. Slaves don't give any power, basically. I imagine this is just for game balance or something, or the fact that not that many nations, this was really a big issue, I guess. We all know the famous example. You can leave it in the comments down below. So I think they're probably just going to steer clear of it. And I think it makes sense that just slaves have no power. They don't make the nobles even more powerful, or the burghers even, just because they own a lot of them. I think it makes sense this way. I think it would overcomplicate some things. Especially then, I guess, if you abolished the slave trade, you'd see massive swings in power as soon as that was implemented. So I like this way. I think it does work a lot better this way. Next, we had Master Poor. He asked, can nobles and burghers also affect research? Because it was listed in the last one that only the clergy affected research. They were the only ones that were called out for it. But he does say, yes, all pops actually affect research. I imagine they're just really small percentages versus the clergy, so that if your clergy is not wiped out, but not very powerful, you are still getting research from other places as well, rather than it just being the clergy. And then next, Nicky the Great asks, speaking of stability, I wish the stability would be closer to the Imperator Rome model than the EU4 again, calling back on those good systems from Imperator, meaning that it would be a scale of 0 to 100 that moves towards the equilibrium of 50, rather than a scale of minus to +3, and that is static. We'll talk about stability in 3 to 4 weeks, was Johan's reply. I imagine we're going to get it like Imperator. I think the Imperator stability model, as this person said, is really nice. I actually really like how stability worked in that game. So I wouldn't mind it changing from the static -3 to +3. I think having that equilibrium of 50, and maybe that could change through laws or different decisions you make and things like that. I think it just lets them have a lot more flexibility because it's a split of 100 rather than a split of 6. I would much prefer the Imperator 0 to 100. Again, let me know what you think in the comments down below, though. Next, we have IVM Firefly. So yeah, folks, if you do want to be in one of these videos, just leave a comment that Johan replies to, and there's a good chance you'll be in here. And this one is actually really important. Johan, speaking of achievements, will we have to activate lucky nations like in EU4 to get them? I found it rather strange to have this condition. There will be no lucky nations mechanic in this game, which is awesome. I understand why they had the lucky nations kind of system in EU4. I think it kind of made sense. That was, again, more, it wasn't like board gamey, but as we've discussed in earlier dev diaries, it did still have those board game influences and things like that. It's a lot better that they've got removed. I think it also makes sense with the earlier time frame as well, that you're not just having these, historically really strong nations get a boost to make them even stronger in the game. I actually like that that's been removed. I know some people have asked about it in the previous comments on previous videos, and it looks like we have got the answer already, which is nice. And then the last one here is Demas asked, will the way personal unions change in Project Caesar, aka EU5? And the answer, just a simple, yes, they will. They will not work how they work now. Again, I think this is great. I think it makes a lot of sense in Europa Universalis, the way you could, you know, take over land peacefully through marriages, obviously the Habsburgs, etc. That's how they work. And it was a good way to do that, you know, set up your marriages in a certain way. So we are going to get those back, but it looks like they're going to get changed, which again is not surprising. As I've said in previous videos, if you look at how the teams on Crusader Kings work, they said, you know, the systems coming from CK2, we're going to bring them into CK3, but we're not just going to copy paste them. We're going to bring improvements, refinements, and they were successful with that. And it looks like the same thing is happening with this, where they're taking a system of personal unions, they're bringing that into EU5, but they're going to refine it, make it better, maybe give us some more control or something like that. Who knows? We'll obviously find out in the future. And yeah, that's it. That's all the replies that Johan gave that I picked out. Let me know in the comments down below what you think about them all. Some really interesting news in there. That's why I do like covering these replies for EU5, because even in the replies that Johan gives, he gives away a lot of information, really, where if you don't see them through going to the forums or through like watching this video, you might not see some of this information for like, you know, 6 months, 7 months, where they do a dev diary about personal unions or something. You know, you might not know that unless you saw this or saw it elsewhere. So that's why I like covering these. It gives us all a little bit more information and allows us to discuss, you know, what's changing, what's staying the same, what we like or dislike. But as I said, that is the end of the replies by Johan. But as always, hit that like button if you've enjoyed it. Subscribe if you're new here. As I've said before in previous videos, I'm going to be covering these Tinto talks up to the announcement of EU5 and then the dev diaries up to launch and then beyond, because I can't wait for this game to come out. And it's really cool covering it, talking with everyone in the comments, getting our kind of like hype going for when the announcement comes and then when we get to see further development of it. So obviously subscribe if you're interested in following that, but I do also cover Crusader Kings and other historical strategy games as well. So plenty on the channel for you to enjoy if you do want to press that button. It is free to do so as well, but we'll leave it there for today and I'll see you in the next one.